Number 5, we want to be able to verify numerous reported items in the literature. Let me just give you a few reasons for thinking we can do this with the Gospels. Many of the items reported agree with existing background knowledge. It's just like what we heard from our previous lecture here on the archaeological evidence with the Israelis or the Jews leaving Egypt, okay, the Exodus. A lot has to do with verisimilitude based on what the evidence that we have, our background knowledge. We've got this with the Gospels as well. So, for example, when it comes to names, we find a lot of the same names that we know existed at that time. So Palestinian Jewish names in late antiquity, Tal Ilan, an Israeli, and Richard Bauckham, a New Testament scholar, have done extensive research on this, and they find that a lot of the names that we have in the Gospels were common names of Palestinian Jews in that period and not those of diaspora Jews, those who were outside of Palestine. They had other names that they used. The names we find in the Gospels are those who were within Palestine, Judea at that point. They also appear with roughly the same frequency in the Gospels as we find in the extra-biblical data, inscriptions and other things like Josephus and Philo. And this suggests that the Gospel authors were well acquainted with Palestine or Judea in that period. Then you've got persons. The persons mentioned in the Gospels, these were people who actually existed. You've got places. The places that we find in the Gospels, these are just some of them. We know that these places, they're not fictional places, they actually existed. Procedures, a lot of things like the crucifixion and burial practices of crucified victims, whether they were left on crosses. We know that in Jerusalem, this was not the case. We know from archaeological data, we know from Josephus that the Romans allowed the Jews to remove the crucified. Josephus mentions this specifically. Prior to the destruction of Jerusalem, they allowed the Jews to remove the crucified and give them a proper burial prior to sunset. We've got confirmation of many items about Jesus from the Gospels that we do in historical Jesus research. And number 6, only a very small percentage of the reported items have a reasonable chance of being errors. Okay. Now, hear me here. I'm not saying the Gospels have errors in it, but I'm saying in order to establish that they are historically reliable, they don't need to be inerrant. Historically reliable is a different kind of standard. So, and it's not with inerrant. So, like, for example, are the Psalms inerrant? Are they divinely inspired? Sure. But are they historically reliable? Not a trick question. But no, we wouldn't say they're historically reliable. We wouldn't say they're historically unreliable. It's an illegitimate question. It's the wrong genre. It's not a historical genre. It'd be like saying, does the color blue meet EPA regulations? You don't ask whether the Psalms or the Proverbs are historically reliable. You don't ask if parables are historically reliable. They're not historical genre. But you could have a historical literature like, say, Sallust's War with Catiline, and you can say, is this historically reliable? You can say, yes, but it's not divinely inspired. These are historically reliable, inerrant, inspired, are different questions. We're seeking to answer here, do they meet the minimal standards of being historically reliable? And one of the criteria is we don't want more than just a small percentage of things reported to be false. Now, when we come to the Gospels, there are a handful of candidates they're reasonably good candidates for being errors. We can't establish that they are errors, and there are people who have tried to reconcile these and explain them, and those explanations may be correct, they may not be. We just don't have a way of verifying them. But some of them are really difficult, such as the death of Judas. Matthew said he hanged himself. The book of Acts says that he fell headlong and his guts burst open and died. Okay, well, these seem to be contradictory. Now, someone said, yeah, he hung himself, the rope broke or the branch broke, and he fell down and burst his guts open and intestines came out. Yeah, well, maybe. Seems ad hoc, seems like a stretch. Besides, if the rope or a branch breaks, do you fall headlong or do you fall on your butt? Oh, well, he fell on his butt and then he tumbled. He was on like this steep hill. He fell on his butt and then he tumbled head first down. That's how he did it. I mean, it gets to be hermeneutical waterboarding until you get the text to tell you what you want to hear, right? And I'm not really for wanting to do that. So I'd say it's a reasonable candidate for an error. Doesn't mean that it is, but at least we have to admit it's a reasonable candidate.